Yesterday, the findings of a global survey were published that found that almost a third of Gen Z men think a wife should obey her husband. They compared their beliefs with those of the men in the baby boomer generation, and they looked at how young men are thinking about gender roles, and the findings were pretty horrifying. 59% of Gen Z men said that men are expected to do too much to support equality, and we're going to get into all of that, but not before I make a tiny point on the language used in this reporting, because it's been framed as if the views these men and boys are expressing are traditional ones, and that gives them a gravitas that I personally don't think they deserve. I think it legitimizes them. I think it sanitizes them somehow. Traditional views, to my mind, kind of implies romantic ones, old-fashioned ones, when in actual fact what these views are within today's climate are just deeply misogynistic. And I think that's an important distinction, because I don't think these findings represent some resurgence of tradition, nor do I think they're a case of regression into traditional patriarchy either. This feels, to me at least, like something else and something new, quite frankly. Sexism on steroids. And there is such a tragic inevitability to all of this. We knew that Gen Z were really the first ones to be growing up in a world that their parents didn't know or understand. We knew that would be dangerous. We knew there would be consequences. Most of us knew it would be women and girls who were going to be the ones to suffer them. And sure enough, here it is. And it's clear in the data, this isn't something boys have garnered from their millennial or Gen X parents, or even from their boomer relatives. This isn't a hangover from an old age. Just look at the disparity in the attitudes towards women initiating sex. They're not modelling behaviours they see around them in the typical way of maintaining a tradition. They are being moulded, they are being fed by algorithms built by tech bros with little to no regulation. This is a story we've heard before. This is Lord of the Flies. We are starting now to understand the extent of the dehumanizing effects of social media. We know too that exposure to online porn like this generation have had leads to unprecedented objectification of women. It doesn't take much to understand that those two things alone, before you throw in a pandemic, absurd politics and politicians, the rise of the manosphere, were a recipe for disaster. And I think something we would do very well to remember as we continue to whack our heads against the wall trying to have this conversation is that when we talk about falling birth rates and young women choosing not to get married or even to date, that this is the context. When we talk about the male loneliness epidemic, when it is framed as a consequence of feminism, the fault of young women, let us remember this information. These are the women, these are the girls that are being expected by a growing number of their peers to be obeying and complying. Their independence, choice and autonomy was fought for. It must now be protected. We must be fervent in our support of them as they run as fast from this as they can get.